Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here today for our webinar on music licensing. Before we jump into our program, I would like to review a few housekeeping items. We will be recording today's webinar and ask that you please keep your devices on mute to reduce any disruptions. We'll accept any questions at the conclusion of the webinar through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. At this time, we are happy to be joined by Jessica Frost, who is the Executive Director, Industry Relations and Licensing for BMI. She will provide an overview on copyright law, the current music licensing landscape, what music is licensable and what is not, and how easy it is to license music, as well as learn more about what legal obligations an operator is exposed to when music is performed without permissions. Both BMI and the LRA have been proud business partners since 2002, offering our members special savings off of their BMI license. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Ms. Jessica Frost, and thank you for being with us today, Jessica.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Pam said, we've had a long-standing relationship with the LRA, and we really appreciate all of our state association partners. It's been a while, obviously, during the last couple of years in COVID, we were not doing a lot of education and presenting. We knew that many of our customers were just trying to keep their doors open. But we have gotten a lot of questions from the industry in the last 6 to 7 months. And so the LRA was nice enough to invite us to come join you all and answer some of your questions. So I'm just going to jump in. And as Pam said, please be jotting down any questions you have throughout, because I definitely think a lot of times the meat of the presentation is really in the Q&A. But let's get started. So today what we're going to cover is essentially what is copyright. We're going to talk about performing rights organizations. You'll hear me refer to them as PROs. That's essentially what BMI is a performing rights organization, and how we are a service organization to any business that's publicly performing music. We will look at the current PRO landscape. We'll talk about how does BMI collect and distribute licensing fees. We will look at the BMI discount program partnership. We'll talk about what's licensable. Specifically, I think most people on this call are very aware that live music is licensable in certain uses, but with a lot of the digital service providers, Spotify, Pandora, Soundtrack Your Brand, other players in the marketplace, we are getting a lot of questions about what is licensable in that space. Are they fully covered when they sign up for one of those services? We will look at the current BMI license for restaurants and bars. And we will talk about the legal ramifications for not licensing music. Essentially, music licensing comes from, it's the federal copyright law. In fact, not just the United States, but the majority of countries around the world recognize intellectual property as something that is protected, and that when the creator of that intellectual property, when their idea is being utilized, they should be compensated for it. This is everything from not just music, but of course, if you write a screenplay, books, photos are protected. Really anything that is your idea that is a registered copyright essentially says that the creator of that copyright should, one, be able to control how that's being used when they're not the one using it. And if it is being used by someone else, they should be compensated for that use. I like to use this image. Most of us don't see this anymore because we don't watch DVDs anymore, but I think we're all familiar at home when you used to put in a movie and this would come up before it went into the actual movie and you couldn't fast forward over it. And I always like to show this because it's a very visual image that we're all familiar with. It essentially says that when you're taking a movie and you're watching it, this is licensed for the private home viewing only. Any public viewing of this film is strictly prohibited, and there's licensing required to do so. The reason I show this with films is, unfortunately, when music is played in a place of business, there's no visual image that comes up to either the musicians or the music providers or the business owner that lets them know that essentially the same laws are required. There are multiple music copyrights. I'm not going to get into much detail about these other ones. You have the right to reproduce or mechanical. That's essentially the re-recording of a musical work. Right to prepare derivative works. That's a sync license, which essentially is what you see when you see a Target ad and you have a Beatles song playing with the Target ad. Clearly, Target had to reach out to the Beatles record label and negotiate on what that payment would be and get approval to use that. There's the right to distribute, and this is everything from vinyl records to MP3s, any way that music is set up to where it's distributed out for your use. There's also licensing requirements for that. But the one that BMI covers, and the one that essentially is of most interest to business owners, is the right to publicly perform music. Based on the federal copyright law, public is defined as any group outside of your normal circle of family or friends. And why this is important is we always remind business owners that, the PROs, BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, we don't get into licensing weddings, anniversary parties, retirement parties. When you're essentially thinking about someone having an event that the only people that can get access to that event has been an invite of family or friends, we do not license that use. Essentially, public performance of music says that music is the property of its creator, and once it is being publicly performed in any business, permission is required. So what is the role that BMI plays? The music licensing or the music ecosystem is actually a very well-connected ecosystem. Songwriters and composers create, or they write the work. Publishers own the work. When a business decides to publicly perform music, the big question is, how do they get permission from the creators? How do they get permission from the songwriters and the publishers? BMI is essentially the bridge between music creators and music users. I always make this very clear to business owners. There's no law that says that a business owner has to secure a BMI license. If they decided they wanted to go to each and every songwriter and publisher and negotiate a deal with them, a payment for the public performance of music in their business, they could do that. No one does that because it would be extremely expensive. And, BMI, the PROs make it very easy for a business to secure a blanket license for all of our catalog of music. And they don't have to worry about how often they play the songs. They know that they are covered. So how does the PRO system work? Essentially, songwriters join a PRO. It's important to note that a songwriter can only be a member of one performing rights organization. So the list here are clearly some of just a handful of some of BMI's top songwriters. We then track performances. We get trillions and trillions of data performances on a quarterly basis, looking at everything from radio, television, films. We get international reports, live concerts, the internet, when you're looking at Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, Apple Music. They're sending in tons of data to BMI of what's being publicly performed. BMI then reaches out to businesses that have decided to offer live entertainment or live music for their customers. And we have licenses in place for clearly the restaurants and bars, hotels, fitness clubs, radio and television, live concerts, festivals and events, any type of digital streaming service. Basically, when you think about in your day-to-day life, any business that you go into that is publicly performing music, they do need to be licensed for that. And BMI has licenses for each specific business. We then take the licensing fees that we collect from the industries that are publicly performing music, and we distribute those out on a quarterly basis in the form of royalties for our songwriters, publishers, and composers. One of the things I always want to make very clear is that when a song is cut by an artist, and I'll use Kenny Chesney, for example, he does not write many of the songs that he publicly performs that are on his albums, and he performs at live concerts. The main way that songwriters are compensated for creating a song that someone else is publicly performing is through the public performance fees. Artists do not cut a check and pay the songwriter and say, I want to buy this song from you for $200,000. It is strictly the main way that they make a living is through these royalties that PROs collect on their behalf. So looking at the music licensing landscape, ASCAP, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with, was founded in 1914. They are owned and governed by their members, which is essentially their songwriters and publishers. They operate under a federal consent decree, and I'll get into that in a little bit after I speak about BMI as well. They currently have about 700,000 registered members or songwriters, and they pay their affiliates or their songwriters on a quarterly basis. BMI was founded in 1939, and our board is comprised of broadcasters. We are also governed by a federal consent decree. We currently operate or collect on behalf of 1.3 million affiliated songwriters and publishers. When BMI opened our doors in 1939, we said that we were going to have an open door policy and we would accept all songwriters at all levels of their career and all genres of music. Why this is important is because ASCAP in the 1930s, there were two different genres of music that were coming out in the space that really could not get representation from ASCAP because their requirements for a songwriter to join was that they had to have 2 or more hit songs. These genres of music were rhythm and blues and what was called back then hillbilly music, which now we all know as country music. BMI said we were going to represent all genres of music, and that's still a policy we hold dearly today. Our royalties are also paid quarterly. I'm going to go back to the consent decree component because why this is important is BMI and ASCAP cannot negotiate rates in the marketplace because we are under a federal consent decree. What that essentially means to all of you is that if your restaurant or bar is a certain size, meaning let's just say 150 occupancy, and you have live music 4 nights a week, your licensing fee with BMI should be the exact same as another neighboring business if they had the exact same size of business and the exact same music. Our rates have to be based on certain criteria in the license that our sales reps cannot negotiate. CSAC was founded in 1930. They are a for-profit PRO, and they are invitation only, which means that songwriters can only join if they are invited to join CSAC. They currently have, from what we've seen, they don't have a lot of information on their website about this. They currently have about 30,000 affiliates. Their royalties are paid monthly. Why I did put ability to negotiate individually, CSAC does not operate under a consent decree. So if a business owner does find that they are in need of a CSAC license, they can work with them on their licensing rates. A newer player in the market is GMR, or Global Music Rights. This was founded in 2013 by Irving Azoff, who many people know was very successful in the music business. He represented the Eagles for many, many years. This is also an invitation-only PRO. They are also for-profit. And even though they are much smaller than BMI and ASCAP, they have brought on some fairly large catalogs of music. They currently, all of their artists are listed on their website. So you can see, Bruce Springsteen, Pearl Jam, Lizzo, Post Malone, just to name a few. So even though they're small, they do represent some fairly successful artists / songwriters with some pretty robust catalogs. A newer player that we've gotten some questions about is AllTrack, and we've really gotten questions more on the state association because they have been reaching out to some of the associations and their members. AllTrack, to our understanding, we know at this point not a tremendous amount about them. They are extremely small, and they represent, from what we can tell, independent creators and publishers. So I have stressed with our association partners and business owners, if you are contacted by them, you need to make sure that they can very specifically explain to you what music of theirs you might be publicly performing in your business. So the BMI restaurant and bar blanket license What types of music is covered on this license? Live bands, karaoke, DJs, any kind of background music that can be CDs or streaming services. The fees are then based on the frequency of music. So clearly a large venue, a large restaurant or bar that has live music 5 to 7 nights a week is going to pay a larger licensing fee than a small establishment that has live music, 1 night a week or less. We do have to base the fee on the size of the business, which is determined by the posted occupancy or the fire code. The rates can be one of the things that are taken into the rates is whether or not you offer dancing or cover charge to your customers. As far as TVs, they are included in the recording fee. So if you're already, if you're already paying for DJs or CDs or streaming services or karaoke, that TV licensing fee is already bundled up into that rate. The benefits of a BMI music license: you get access to over 20 million songs, and they are created and owned by more than 1.3 million songwriters and composers. The license is tailored to your specific music needs. One of the things that we let business owners know is you can change your licensing fee up to 4 times a year. So should you decide, maybe I want to try karaoke, or maybe we want to try live music and it doesn't work out, you can always contact BMI and let them know that you have no longer are offering that music, and our licensing reps will update your account accordingly. As Pam mentioned, we have a long-standing association discount program in place with the LRA. That savings essentially gives you 10% off of your annual licensing fees with BMI. It's 5% for being an association member, which is automatically applied. Another 5% association online or pay feature, which is when you pay your BMI fee online or via telephone, you get an additional 5%. And then there's a 10% timely pay discount if you pay your licensing fee in full within 30 days of invoice. So technically you can save up to 20% off of your annual licensing fees. We do offer multiple payment options, whatever works best as far as for your budgeting annually, quarterly, and semi-annually. And it's always important to know that by licensing the music that you're playing in your business, you are supporting the creation of new music by supporting songwriters and their crafts. Living here in Nashville, where so many songwriters live, the average songwriter's annual income is about $8,000 a year. So this is definitely a labor of love. Many songwriters have to find other ways, of course, to supplement their income, but the licensing fees that BMI does collect is a big part of how they can continue to do this as a living. Again, LRA member special savings. You can see the joint marketing piece we have that explains the discounts. So what's licensable? Of course, live music is licensable. DJs, karaoke. I always start with these 3 because we do hear sometimes from business owners that they are under the impression that the karaoke provider or the bands or the DJ can secure the public performance license for their music that they're playing in your business. That is not accurate. None of the PROs provide the entertainment with the license. Essentially, a karaoke company or a DJ, they may have a license to be operating as that business, but it's not covering them for the public performance of the music that they're playing when they're in your establishment. Televisions is another one that I bring up only because, especially for sports bars where you've got a lot of televisions, televisions are indeed considered licensable based on the federal copyright law. As we all know, there's a ton of music throughout all kinds of sporting events. Also, the jingles you hear at the beginning of Law and Order or various, shows that we all hear all the time, those are copywritten jingles and they are compensated for those public performances. Many times business owners think if they've gotten their, business, they have Dish or, they're using Comcast for business, that what they're paying every month to that provider gives them the licensing they need. It does not. The only thing that it gives you licensing access to is to their content and channels. It's not actually covering the music that's then being publicly performed in your business. I wanted to talk about streaming services because, as we all know, this is how the majority of America now listens to music. And there is a lot of confusion, I think, in this space. And we just want to make sure that everyone knows that any of these services do not cover the public performance licensing fees for a business. When you are using a service like this, just like every month, I pay my Apple Music to have access to all of their songs. I am strictly paying for access to those songs. If I decided to take my phone into a place of business and plug that in and that be the background music, I would still need a license with the PROs for that public performance of music. There are a few commercial music services that do cover the public performance licensing fees for a business, but there is certain restrictions. Mood Media, Cloud Cover Music, SiriusXM Music for Business, and Pandora for Business, which of course is different than just the traditional Pandora. They do cover the licensing fees. So when a business signs up for their service, they are collecting and taking part of those licensing fees you're paying to them and distributing back to the PROs. So that music is covered. But it's important to note that if you have any type of dancing to this music at your establishment, it does not cover that. There cannot be any activity at all to this music. It's strictly background. And the other thing that's important for a business owner to know is if you have any additional music, live music, karaoke, DJ, you would still need to be covered for those uses. So one of the questions we get a good bit from the associations is just to remind their members what really is the consequences if a business chooses to not license their music. Under US copyright law, essentially, if you fail to obtain a license, it can result in copyright infringement. And it's not inexpensive. Statutory damages can go up to $30,000 each for each copyrighted song that's performed. It can go up to $150,000 for each copyrighted song if deemed willful infringement. And willful infringement is essentially saying, can the PRO show that the business did know that they did need to be licensed? Did BMI provide them with all the educational information in their letters and outreach for them to understand their licensing responsibilities, and they still decided not to license the music? The infringer can also be required to pay copyright owners cost, including attorney fees. I always stress this because BMI does not ever want to sue a business. We want businesses to publicly perform music, right? It's really how our affiliates make a living. But when a songwriter affiliates with BMI, and we have attempted numerous times to contact and license a business, and they have essentially refused to license the music, our role in supporting our songwriters is to ensure that their permissions are protected. And so it is a last ditch effort. 90% of the businesses, I'd say 94% of the businesses BMI contacts license and do the right thing. So it's a very small percentage of businesses that end up this route. But it does happen. So I always want to remind people of that. One of the great benefits of the association relationship is in the past, if there's ever been a business owner in the state of Louisiana where, we see that they are an LRA member and our legal team is getting ready to pursue for infringement, we always reach out to the association and we say, would you like to reach out to this business owner and let's get this taken care of, where it's a lot less expensive for everyone involved. And the majority of the time, all of our association partners say, yes, we do want to reach out to them and make sure they understand. Because sometimes it's just that they're not fully certain what the requirements are. And I think sometimes it's because maybe their attorneys are not as familiar with copyright law and they don't really think it's something that they need to do. So we have plenty of time for questions, and that's really where I wanted to open it up. and hear from all of you on what questions you have about music licensing.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm looking here. If anyone has questions, please go in the Q&A section. I do have something that maybe, Jessica, that you would want to point out, and that would be in reference to social media. And if businesses or even are using TikTok or Facebook or Instagram and also using copyrighted music, are you seeing more of that as well?
Absolutely. Instagram especially has been a huge platform for the eating and drinking space of really getting out. We all know that Instagram and the whole sharing photos, and you pair that with wonderful looking food and drinks, it's a natural partnership. And I think especially from what we've seen with the younger generation, they really look to see that businesses are active on social media and that they're posting, you know, specials or upcoming live entertainment if they have it. Those sites, it's important for business owners to know, are already licensed with the PROs. So it's different from a business putting music on their individual website. We do have website licenses for businesses that decide to have some type of music on their personal restaurant website. But for Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all of those players are indeed licensed with the PROs, and they are tracking what music is being performed and ensuring that that information is sent back to the PROs and paying as such.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a question. Does my business need BMI and ASCAP?
Yes, so I always preface this and say my job is not to sell ASCAP service, but I also want to be fully transparent. If a business is playing music in their establishment, they definitely need a BMI and ASCAP license. BMI and ASCAP currently cover about 90, the last I saw about 90% of all popular music in all genres. So it would be very difficult for a business owner to only perform BMI music. One of the things that I also, recommend for business owners or at least advise is many of the songs that we know and love have 1 or 2 or 3 songwriters on that song, and each get a different, percentage share. So it is very common for a song to have a BMI writer and a ASCAP writer on the same song, and they are splitting that percentage, and the PROs are as well. There's a lot of data tracking of that. So yes, if you want to use music and not worry about it and just make sure that you have everything covered, I do recommend that you get both licenses. So let's see, we've got another, nope, I think that was
No.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we have any others. Any other questions? And I do want to reiterate that Jessica is right. She, her and I have been in touch with one another through the years when, to the example that she stated, is this person a member? Can you reach out to them? And what we tell our members too, and I'm saying this because we've experienced it, that absolutely they do work. The intention is to work with the operator because this is just another piece of already many different things you have to worry about. So they are great partners. Okay, so we have 2 more questions there, Jessica. Can we touch again on BMI licensing related to event venues with live bands and DJs?
Absolutely. So the big question why I bring that up is we have spoken, it's not that common, but sometimes we speak to business owners that say, look, I already have this DJ provider and he comes in once a week and he says he has all of the necessary licensing. I don't need this PRO license. None of the PROs have licenses in place to license live bands or DJs. Essentially, the business is deciding to have that entertainment in their establishment, so it's up to the business owner to ensure that that licensing is in place. So if you ever have a live band or a DJ or a karaoke provider tell you, look, we already have all the licensing in place, I can assure you They do not, because none of us offer licenses to cover them for that. They may be referring to them having a business license to be operating as a DJ or a karaoke provider, like all businesses have to provide services to businesses that show they're insured and such. But they cannot cover the public performance of music. The next question I see is, just to be clear, if we had mood media and use it for background music, if you only use it for background music, you do not need to license through BMI and ASCAP. Mood media is already taking those rates that you pay to them and distributing back to the PROs for the public performance. The only reason you would need another license is if you decided to offer any additional music for your customers. If you wanted to have live music, or if you wanted to, stream off of your Spotify account, the mood media wouldn't cover that. But if mood media is your sole music use and you're using it for background music, you're covered.
And I'll take that. The other one, does ASCAP have an LRA discount? At this time, no, but we can absolutely, if there's something that we work with those partners, with ASCAP or CSAC, because occasionally they will come into the market. Right now, we do not have a discount. BMI is the one who we do have a discount with, but with all of this being said, obviously BMI covers, not all are covered under one umbrella, so you would need to work with those. But if we are able to secure some type of discount, we'll definitely be sure to notify you of that. Okay, Jessica, do you see that other question?
If you don't have live events often, is it possible to get a license just for that event? Absolutely. We do have a license that's called an occasional use license, and that can cover the business if you have 4 or less times a year. So if you have live music or DJ or karaoke 4 times a year or less, you could qualify for the occasional music use license, which is almost half the cost. And it's important to note that the LRA and the timely pay discount still does apply to even the occasional use. The other avenue we get is that people say, well, what if we have it, we don't do it, we do it more than 4 times, we do it 8 times a year. Well, depending on if you do it 8 times a year and it's all throughout the summer, and then you're done in, let's just say hypothetically, you say we don't have any live music after, November, you can always call and adjust and say, we're not doing live music anymore, take it off. And when we decide to start back up our live entertainment in the spring, we'll call you back. So there's ways to make sure you're utilizing the license where if you don't need the license for that period of time, you're not paying for it.
I'm trying to see if we have, I don't think we've had any others. Great questions.
Yes, these are all really good.
Well, we are at 10:36. Last call for anyone. If you have any questions for Jessica.
Would you mind if I just ask your audience, because I'm always curious about this?
Sure.
We've clearly seen, of course, because we heavily follow this industry and how it's faring over the, last challenging couple of years. I'm curious, from those of you on the phone that do have live entertainment, or if you've explored it in the past, we hear all of the things about food cost going up. Of course, what you have to pay employees has gone up. I'm curious if you are also seeing that rates for booking bands, or has that also gone up? Or if anybody, I was just curious if anybody had experienced that. I know Nashville is a very unique city. We have so much talent here that basically essentially will play for free because there's so many musicians that live here. But I'm very aware that when you get out of Nashville, and probably the same in New Orleans, when you get out of these cities that are just have so much talented musicians, I'm always curious if it's getting more difficult or cost prohibitive for businesses to book entertainment.
I don't see anything coming through yet. That's a great question, though. And that can be something too. Okay, no increases that compares to other increases.
Okay. I just was curious of that. Well, you have a great a great team at the LRA. We love working with them. And obviously, if any questions come up that you didn't want to bring up publicly in this call, you can always Pam can direct you to me, and I'm happy to answer that. I'm happy to, speak with you directly.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and I want to thank all of you for attending today, and have a great day. I just want to see, I'm just looking, look, some are chiming in now.
That's interesting about Alltrack. So
They have been emailing me. Okay, yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that because we have been heavily watching that.
Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again, Jessica.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all taking the time to join me today. And thanks so much, Pam.
You're welcome.
Bye.